You know, Susan, I'm not buying into the fact that we're not going to have a deal with China. I think, and I've been saying, we are going to have a deal with China, and not necessarily because President Trump needs it or the United States needs it. China needs it. So there's enormous pressure on China's leaders to get a deal done with the United States, which ultimately is going to benefit China and it's going to benefit the global economy.
I said other people thought there wasn't going to be a deal. I think there's going to be a deal as well with Wang Qishan, that meeting with President Trump in Davos later on this month.
But, you know, Friday was a great day. Thursday was not so great a day on the fears that China was slowing down mightily. And, of course, the Apple warning, Melissa, and everything else. So wouldn't it be a kick, as I've repeated on this show and others, that, you know, we score a trade deal, but China is too weak to make good on it?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen. They're going to continue to try to pump up their own economy, which gives signs that maybe they're not ready to make a deal yet. And that could prolong the market making new highs again. And if it runs into the summer of this year until we make a deal, or even the fall of this year until we get a deal done, I don't think that's going to be good for the market. I'm very bullish on the market long term, but it remains to be seen, because if there's a stall, an indefinite stall in the trade talks, then it definitely is going to affect the market. But right now we're still holding the uptrend. Everyone's saying bearish, bearish, bearish. We're not. And let me explain why. 2017 was such a big rally and such an anomaly year that you cannot say that a 20% pullback means that it's at a downtrend because of 2017. So the fact is we are still holding the uptrend in the market. And so if people are still in, I don't think that they should panic.
All right. We're also monitoring another development. Watch closely as this government shutdown that now enters its third week. There has been a sighting of the vice president outside the Eisenhower office building, used to be called the old executive office building next to the White House, where he will be meeting with, we're told, some congressional leaders. We just don't know who they are. Is this having any effect?
I think it's not having. These political things are not as big as what's going with China, too. The point was just raised. I will say 99 was a big year in the stock market, and it didn't stop the first 20% in 2000 from becoming a 50% slide. So that in itself is not going to cause a problem. I think the bigger question is, how weak can China get without dragging us into a recession? And I think if there's a global recession, it's going to be hard to dodge that. But I also think China can go down, so to say, without taking us down. First of all, we're going into this trade war with a stimulus package in the form of tax cuts and spending. The last big economy to go down, so to say, was actually Japan. You know, Trump used to talk about that in the 80s. They peaked. Their market's still down half from 89, and their economy's never really recovered. We had a mild recession when they went down, but we had a tax increase, the no new taxes, read my lips, and we also had the S&L crisis. We don't have a bank crisis right now. We don't have a tax increase. That means we can handle one major country, because, again, Japan was a big deal back then in the world economy.
Well, we have a lot more debt right now.
Yeah. Well, China has a lot of debt, too. As long as the Chinese economy slows down and doesn't spread, if Apple starts talking about every country there's no sales, then we could start talking about dragging us down.
I thought that Apple news was really concerning because arguably they're probably the most successful U.S. company operating in China. They build most of their smartphones in the country. And this is something that Tim Cook, was one of his merits stepping into the job for Steve Jobs when he took over at Apple, because they couldn't get into China until Cook took over. So I'm really concerned as to what that says about the underlying Chinese economy.
Well, even Kevin Hassett of the Council of Economic Advisors, that he smiles a lot. So I don't get too alarmed when he says dire things, because he's smiling as he says it. But one of the things he said, and Melissa, you can help me with this, is there are going to be a lot of companies reporting exposure to China, and it's going to impact their earnings. Now, they might a good many of them might use it as an excuse, but it's a palpable excuse. So what are we likely to see as a result?
I think, well, when first quarter earnings start in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see what happens. But remember, Apple didn't have good earnings before they came out with this last week. The last quarter of 2018, they gapped down and fell in the earnings, and they never recovered since then. They've been selling off.
Well, this is about revenues, right? Now, most companies would love to have the revenues that an Apple does.
Well, true. Apple's still a strong company. Apple isn't going anywhere. They could turn it around like that. So
would you recommend Apple?
Not to buy right now.
Dan, would you?
Actually, I would. I do think there's runway with Apple. I think part of this is a little bit of hedging on Apple's part, because they want to hedge against what's going to happen with China, which the outcome is a little uncertain right now. But I still believe that there is going to be a deal. And I think, Neil, that we have to give President Trump some credit here, that he is not a president that's kicked a can down the road like all the other presidents before him have. Everybody's complained about China's tariffs and their tactics and stealing
think it's gonna
intellectual
work out?
property.
Bottom line, you think it's gonna work out?
I think it is going to work out. I truly believe that.
He's motivated.